here to shed some light about what's going on in New Jersey. Joining us from Newsmax, New York, the former mayor of Bogota, New Jersey, Steve Lonegan. Steve was also the nominee against Cory Booker in the 2013 Senate race there in New Jersey, as he was the Republican nominee. And correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but for purposes of full disclosure, in 2009, you also aspired to get the New Jersey gubernatorial nomination that, in the final analysis, went to Chris Christie, correct?
That's correct, and in that primary of 2009, I made the appointment of Supreme Court Justice a centerpiece issue in that campaign, in which the governor now promised back then to remake the New Jersey State Supreme Court as a conservative court.
And so he made the promise then, but Steve, as you see it, what is the reality in terms of those appointments and nominations to New Jersey's highest court?
JD, the reality is that New Jersey has the most liberal, progressive, activist Supreme Court in the country. They've given us some of the most radical policies in the nation regarding housing and education and other issues. And this governor's had 5 opportunities now to appoint conservative judges, and he's failed to do that. He has recently reappointed the liberal Democrat Supreme Court Justice Stuart Rabner, who will now serve there till past 2030. The real important issue with that is he'll have the deciding vote in the next 2 redistrictings in New Jersey, the state legislative district, which pretty much guarantees Democrats will remain in control of the state through at least the next 27 years. And he has just let down on all of his promises to remake this court as a conservative court. What's the sad part about this is this will assure that New Jersey continues its downward spiral.
Well, Steve, as we look at the situation, and obviously it does not occur in a vacuum, and I'm not trying to cop a plea for Chris Christie, but a lot of people say, well, that was then, this is now. The reality is we've got Democrats with whom we have to govern, and so probably some of the Christie folks would offer the pragmatist argument in stark contrast to philosophical fealty. But are you willing to cut the governor any slack in this situation based on the reality that so many Democrats are in positions where the governor has to reach out to them and form some coalitions and find some compromise?
You know, JD, I've supported the governor when he was right. I've even defended him on Bridgegate because I felt the allegations were not proven and were false. However, in this case, he could have used his ability, his outspokenness, his authority as one of the most powerful executives in the country to push through his nomination. He has not even tried to do that. He has not even worked to do that. He's even left 2 seats open with temporary appointments. He even failed to renominate 2 real conservative judges over the last 2 years. The state Supreme Court Justice Stuart Rabner is a personal friend of the governor, and that shouldn't have weighed into the issue. He allegedly made a deal to get 1 person for the Democrats, Rabner, and that would give him a couple of conservative appointments. That hasn't even happened. So what we've seen him do is appoint a Republican, Lee Solomon, who's another liberal, and just has failed on his promises to pro-lifers, to conservatives across the board.
Steve,
and if that's any indication of the kind of fight we're going to see when it comes to, say, being president, appointing U.S. Supreme Court justices, the nation would be in a lot of trouble.
Well, Steve, just take us through the mechanics very briefly in New Jersey. The governor can appoint to the New Jersey Supreme Court, but is that not subject to confirmation of the New Jersey Senate, or is it just an outright appointment done by the governor?
It's an appointment subject to the confirmation of the Senate. He can also do recess appointments. He can also hold up, JD, a whole host of other appointments for the Democrats. The governor of New Jersey has a lot of power, and he can wield that power if he truly wants to implement his agenda and truly wants to live up to his promises. He can hold the line. He can force public debate. He can use lots and lots of methods to push his people through. He hasn't tried to do that. It's very, very disappointing to conservatives, very disappointing to me because, you know, even though I ran a primary against the governor, after he won the primary, I went out and campaigned for him because I believed he'd live up to that promise.
Well, we take a look at what may be out there for Governor Christie nationally. A new poll released today. It's the Quinnipiac poll. Let's take a look at some of the numbers. Governor Christie, this is a mythical matchup for president in 2016, Governor Christie trails former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton by 8 percentage points, 50 to 42. Now, you see those poll numbers, and the whole notion that the governor, having been reelected, can turn and now look at a national campaign. Is he going to be able to mind business at home and likewise be able to entertain those national aspirations?
Well, New Jersey has a lot of issues right now, a massive budget deficit, unemployment, higher than national average unemployment. We're still recovering from Hurricane Sandy. It's going to require a lot of attention by the chief executive, so it could be very demanding. And it's also going to rely a lot on his polling numbers inside the state and how he responds to these problems with his Supreme Court appointments. I think this is going to haunt him through Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, because conservatives are not going to tolerate the appointment of liberal judges in such key positions.
Steve, a couple of minutes remain. Let me just boil it down. If Governor Christie called you away from the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd, if he said, Steve, look, I need help, what would you advise him in terms of priorities, both to satisfy conservatives and maintain national ambitions?
He has 2 appointments left to the New Jersey State Supreme Court. I would highly recommend that he gets strongly behind 2 very conservative judges who will stop legislating from the bench, who will uphold the rule of law, and give power back to the legislature. That's very, very critical. They should be pro-life. They should be pro-limited government. I think that could be the single most important message he could send to the state and to the rest of the country. He also needs to work harder to cut the sides of the New Jersey state budget and make New Jersey economically prosperous again. You know, JD, New Jersey went from 40 years ago being one of the nation's leading economies to one of the worst. That's only because of failed government policy. That can be fixed, and he should be working on that every day.
And as you were mentioning the things you would suggest to help him out, Steve, we had footage up from that anti-Christie ad from the judicial crisis people talking and bemoaning the Supreme Court situation in New Jersey. Let me also ask you this question before we part company. Anyone who aspires to national office wants the help of key members of their party at home. As we've mentioned, you've had your differences with the governor, but you were the Republican nominee in that special election for the U.S. Senate against Cory Booker. If Governor Christie came calling for your support for president, would you give it to him? We got about 30 seconds.
JD, based on his current appointments to the New Jersey State Supreme Court and understanding their long-term ramifications and realizing that the next president could appoint as many as 3 judges to the U.S. Supreme Court, my answer would be no.
All right, Steve Lonegan making news today, joining us from Newsmax New York. Steve, we thank you for your time and your customary straight shooting ways. Thanks so much.
Thank you, JD.
All right, so you heard from Steve Lonegan. Right now, he couldn't support Chris Christie. Your take on the entire situation in New Jersey. Why don't you tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV, #America's Forum, and we will have more on our program following this timeout.